In Vietnam, the country will extend its coronavirus lockdown in 12 provinces, and that will include Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. This will be for 7 days, but some restrictions will be lifted in some areas outside of the country. Charlene Navaja reports. Hello, Charlene.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Charlene. How are you doing?
Great. I'm great.
Okay, good.
As always.
As always.
Okay. So for the top updates in Vietnam, I'm going to start up with the meeting from Nguyen Xuan Phuc, the Prime Minister of Vietnam, and the Prime Minister of Sweden. So Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc and his Swedish counterpart Stefan Löfven discussed the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic and enhancing the two countries' relations during phone talks yesterday. The Prime Minister informed Prime Minister Löfven of the overall measures Vietnam had been taking. The Vietnamese government's resolve to control the outbreak and the positive outcomes it had seen so far, including the safety of Vietnamese citizens and, of course, the foreign nationals in the country. He asked Sweden to provide healthcare and support for Vietnamese nationals living in the Scandinavian country during the pandemic. He also expressed Vietnam's readiness to share information and experience in COVID-19 prevention and control with Sweden, and to strengthen ties with the other countries and international organizations in this regard. Sweden was an important and trustworthy partner of Vietnam in the European Union. He expressed his appreciation for the valuable assistance provided to Vietnam by the Swedish government and its people over the decades, and hoped that bilateral ties would be further strengthened. Valuing Vietnam's outstanding achievements in combating COVID-19, Prime Minister Löfven expressed his thanks for medical assistance and treatment given to Swedish citizens in the country suffering from the virus. Löfven hoped the two countries would exchange experience and increase cooperation and disease prevention and control within both bilateral and multilateral frameworks, especially as Vietnam held the key positions in ASEAN and the UN Security Council, thereby helping to foster international cooperation. He also expressed his delight at the development of the friendship and multifaceted cooperation between Vietnam and Sweden. Um, he called on both sides to build on their achievements and tap into cooperative potential in different spheres, particularly sustainable development, innovation, and trade and investment, while bringing to the play European Union Vietnam Free Trade Agreement and Investment Protection Agreement. So, meanwhile, in Vietnam, just like what Alma mentioned, so Vietnam will extend its coronavirus lockdown in 12 provinces. That includes Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City for 7 days, at least 7 days. Although restrictions will be lifted in some areas outside the Southeast Asian countries' main cities, the government said yesterday. Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc made the decision to extend the lockdown at these until April 22nd. At a meeting yesterday, the government said, adding that those 12 provinces were highly prone to the new virus, which has infected 268 people up to date in the country, but reported no deaths. He said that this is a difficult decision as there are opinions to support the extension of the social distancing measures, but there are also opinions calling for the lifting of the measures to revive economic activities. The Southeast Asian country first introduced restriction measure requiring people to stay home except for emergencies or to buy food and keep at least 2 meters apart on April 1st to contain the spread of the new coronavirus. The statement said the lockdown could be extended further and that other provinces might also be subject to the lockdown. He added that there must be no mistake that allows disease to return to the country. So back to you, Alma.
All right. Charlene, compared to other ASEAN member states such as Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, which have thousands of cases and numerous deaths, Vietnam's number of cases are relatively low despite a lack of resources. They've managed the crisis so well that it also avoided becoming a hotspot. How did Vietnam do it, Charlene?
Right, that's right, Alma. It's Vietnam is considered a third world country, and with a crisis like this, especially with limited resources, people could be thinking that it would ravage such a country. However, Vietnam handled it well. That there aren't any reported fatalities up to date. So, going back to February 1st, Vietnam kicked off a series of initiatives to tackle the spread of the said virus. The government swiftly suspended all flights to and from China, where the virus originated, then decided to keep schools closed after the Lunar New Year break. 2 weeks later, there have been reports about migrant workers returning from Wuhan, concentrating in Vinphuc province, so that pushed government to impose a 21-day quarantine. And it also imposed coronavirus measures such as a mandatory 14-day quarantine for anyone returning to the country. So anyone, both locals and expats. And also, Vietnam has a strong culture of surveillance with people expected to inform on their neighbors if they suspect any wrongdoing. So this includes sharing fake news and wrong information on social media. So I just want to share, Alma, one of my friends here, local, um, she mentioned about a teenager who actually share a status on her Facebook account. That was in the morning that she was positive of coronavirus,
Okay.
and in the afternoon she just said like, oh, it's April 1st, it's um, April Fool's Day. But at the end of the day, the police actually caught her and she was fined. The fine was around 500 to 700
Oh
US
my
dollars.
goodness.
Right. It was really crazy. And then also Vietnamese government has this registration. It's an application, or you can actually go to a website and then you can register your name, and then you have to state, if of course if you're feeling sick, or of course normal. So people can trace, the government can actually trace where you live, and then they can give you a swift
Test.
security,
Oh,
yeah, and
security.
test.
Oh,
Yes, yeah, it's
ah,
it's really good.
yeah.
And also the government approved 1.1 billion US dollars to aid the economic impact on the
Okay.
outbreak. And again, despite the lack of resources, the country helped other nations affected by coronavirus by donating over 1 million masks to Europe and other Southeast Asian countries.
Wow. All right.
Yes, Alma?
Thank you very much, Charlene. And keep safe, stay healthy. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, you too, Alma. Thank you. So this has been Charlene bringing you live updates from Hanoi, Vietnam. We live in interesting times.